Well, let's turn our attention to the Middle East, where Israel is reportedly preparing for war with the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. This comes after weeks of attacks from the Yemen rebels and after Israel delivered a stern warning in the United Nations that they wouldn't tolerate any more rocket attacks. And to be honest, why should they? An Israeli security source told London Times, quote, "We're going fully in." Joining me now to discuss this and more is Sky News contributor Kosha Gada. Kosha, Israel having gotten into the conflict with Hamas, they've pretty much destroyed Hamas. They've pretty much rendered Hezbollah ineffective. We've seen Assad run off from Syria, or a regime change there. They're on a bit of a roll. They might as well keep going and deal with all their enemies now rather than have these things drag on, don't you think?
That is definitely the perspective they're taking, and they're obviously out there defending their sovereignty and their security, which by and large most people support. I think where the situation gets a bit trickier and murkier is, does it end with these terrorist groups or these rebel groups, or does Hezbollah lead into something with Iran, which is obviously a bigger conflict? Is the U.S. getting dragged in militarily? Because that is a position that is not popular back home domestically in terms of how much involvement should extend beyond diplomatic or financial support of Israel into militarily. And then obviously we've got new leadership coming into the U.S. And while Trump is definitely very pro-Israel and pro them going out and defeating these rebel groups, he's also balancing that with generally being very non-interventionalist in nature and not wanting U.S. involvement. So lots of dynamics in place since that flashpoint with October 7th, but they certainly are on a roll, and militarily it would make sense from their perspective that they continue this and at least try to take out these rebel groups.
The other part of this, Kosha, is that, I'm very much of the opinion, why should Israel have their civilians continually bombarded with rockets? No country should tolerate that. But the Houthis are not only a threat to Israel, they've continually disrupted international shipping. So the economy of the world is being affected. Shouldn't the international community back Israel in dealing with these terrorists who, as I said, are not only threatening Israel, they're threatening international trade?
Yes, the Red Sea, which they control, is a big sea lane for shipping and global supply chains. And there was something that had happened about 18 months ago when they sort of rose up, and that got a lot of attention. People could feel it, even in the commercial sector. So that's definitely one aspect to it. There are U.S. warships out there that have been harassed or attacked a little bit, which is another reason why the U.S. would want to get in. But, you know, with this conflict being as messy and just the world changing as much as it is, you also saw at that time that they were giving special passage to Russian and Chinese ships, for example. So you could see that as well when we look at the world in this multipolar situation that we're in. There's just different factions and alliances coming together, and not all of them are clean or helpful always. But for sure, I think the supply chain risk aspect of that Red Sea lane that the Houthis control is something that makes it a little bit more relevant in other people's national interests.
Well, you talk about a multipolar world. We've got conflict in the Middle East, and then, of course, we've got conflict in Europe. I want to get your thoughts on Ukraine and where the war against Russia is likely to go. Russia's foreign minister has rejected the peace proposal being floated by Trump and his team to end the ongoing conflict. And, of course, Trump made a big deal about once he gets into office, he's going to end that conflict very quickly. But the Russian foreign minister said at a news conference, quote, "We are not happy, of course, with the proposals made by members of the Trump team to postpone Ukraine's admission to NATO for 20 years and to station British and European peacekeeping forces in Ukraine." Now, the minister also warned Trump that even if he, quote, tries to relaunch bilateral ties, he'll have to swim against the stream. Now, Kosha, Trump's made a big deal of his ability, because of his relationship with Zelensky and with Putin in particular, that he can sort this out. Is that looking unlikely now?
You know, he certainly did. He famously said on the campaign trail in 24 hours he's going to have this war end. So we'll see. All eyes are watching him. Obviously, there's a difference between rhetoric and what he'll actually be able to do. These proposals that have allegedly been floating, I think it's important to note that who knows what they are. They could be trial balloons where they're trying to sort of eke out a position and get some response unofficially. Since he isn't actually president yet, he's actually not even permitted to represent the United States formally in that time. So he's sort of like teeing it up. I think, you know, the big picture, James James, that I think we all have to remember, though, is ultimately any peace settlement, there's always a way in any negotiation, there's always a position out there. But the question is who's going to have to concede how much. And has always been strategic asymmetry in this region where it is of vital national interest to Russia much more than it is to the U.S. or the West. That's just a harsh reality of this whole picture. And because of that, I think the terms and Russia's willingness to concede is going to set or lack of willingness to concede, I should say, is going to set the tone of what happens. And that's what it's going to come down to, I think, of how much pressure the U.S. can put on the Ukrainian side of it to accept certain concessions that maybe previously under the Biden administration they were not willing to do. I think what most people expect is Trump is going to push in that direction, knowing that Russia really is in the box position here more so than Ukraine.
All right, I've only got one more minute, Kosha, but I did want to quickly ask you about a major security breach incident. Chinese hackers have been accused by the US Treasury of accessing several workstations and unclassified documents after a third-party software service provider called Beyond Trust, love that name, had been compromised. It's always a concern when you've got foreign entities compromising places like the Treasury, but this is particularly concerning being China, isn't it?
Yes, and they've, of course, come out with a statement, as we would expect, saying it's not them. You know, this is the world that we live in, where there are state actors hacking each other all the time. China and others are masters at cyber warfare, if you will. And on the flip side of it, we're also living in a world where we just have larger and larger digital footprints, and citizens are either for convenience or even being compelled to upload more and more of their highly sensitive data into these government databases, whether directly or indirectly, in this case, with the Treasury. And that's just unfortunately a very tough position that we're in, and it's almost par for the course, so we're always going to expect that. There are defenses that are hopefully getting better, but it feels like the defensive side is always behind the 8 ball, and these hacks just keep coming.
Yeah, these hacks are almost every other day lately, so we'll keep an eye on that. Kosha Gada, thanks for joining me. Happy New Year, and look forward to chatting to you more in 2025.